How fast do we make decisions and when do we change our minds? Jamie, that is the profound question, meaty question that I am looking forward to digging into with you on episode 3 of our Happy Heuristics podcast. I should not forget the subtitle here, Shock-Resistant Leader Routines and Rules of Thumb for a Complex World.
Yeah, it's a great topic. And if for those who have listened to episodes 1 and 2, you've heard us kind of understand what heuristics are and why we use them. The world is complex, uncertain, and we have to move faster. We have to be able to operate in that environment. And so the use of heuristics allow us to be right most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
No certainty. It's not an algorithm. It's not something that works for every decision, but be right most of the time, but be able to operate with less brain power than it takes to try to make every decision like it was a PhD thesis.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do. And we're sharing these heuristics from our own experiences, from those we've learned, from people we coach, from things we've learned, and then we hope people can use them to make themselves smarter, more effective, more efficient. So this theme this episode is rethinking when decisions are made. So when do we have to make a decision? So my heuristic is delay decisions to the last possible moment. So that's one that I've learned. We'll talk about that in a bit. We're going to start with yours.
Yeah.
So what's your heuristic on this theme?
Yeah. So my heuristic this episode, Jamie, is reserve the right to get smarter. And I'm just going to be honest, full disclosure. Technically speaking, it's not a heuristic because it's not like people come to decision points where they go, is this the place where I reserve the right to get dumber or the right to get smarter? Right?
Sure. It does sound good though.
Yeah. But it is a mantra. It is a mantra. And if you invoke it as a mantra, it will come to operate as a heuristic for you. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I think I mentioned in episode 1, someone I'm a fan of, Annie Duke, an author, great author, but also a former poker champion.
Mm-hmm.
And one of her, part of her shtick, which I think is really appealing and resonates, is she says, a lot of times when you talk to people in business, they talk like it's about chess. And in fact, when people think they're getting sophisticated about business strategy, they go, we're moving from checkers to chess. And she said,
sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Very sophisticated. And she said, and the thing about chess is that all the pieces are always visible on the board.
Yes.
And that metaphor is limited to business though, because the reality is that we don't have that kind of visibility to actually what's happening. And she says, in fact, in business, most of the time, we're not playing chess. She says, you're playing my game. And her game is Texas Hold'em. And in Texas Hold'em, you have to start making decisions before all the cards are on the table.
Right.
So, part of her deal, one of the titles of one of her books is Thinking in Bets. She says a bet is just, a decision, a decision that you make in an uncertain world, right? So what does that have to do with reserving the right to get smarter and thinking in bets, thinking in bets and this whole heuristic, right? It's the idea is that because we operate uncertainty, because all the cards are not on the table, it can invite analysis paralysis. If we can get overloaded with the fear and the uncertainty and trying to figure out what's happening on what we would like to believe is a chessboard and really isn't, and so we want to study things to death. And so the idea of reserving the right to get smarter is actually the core and unstated heuristic is just make a damn decision. Make a damn decision based on the best information available now. Do not get your ego stuck to it. And when new information becomes available, reserve the right to get smarter. in politics, it's it's considered a criticism to call someone a flip-flopper, and I get that, because that's when people change their opinions based on conveniences,
Right.
political, cynical political calculations,
Sure.
right? But that's a very different thing. That's a very different thing than reserving the right to get smarter when new information becomes available. I mean, there is a political culture that has almost fetishized at times the idea of staying the course,
Right.
which actually makes us subject to sunk cost fallacy, right?
Yes.
Like, and applying that to organizations, like, there is probably not a large organization on the planet that hasn't done like invested some ungodly amount of money in something like an ERP, is what, the classic example of sunk cost fallacy, where they invest money and then they continue to invest, they continue to stay the course, even after everyone's sort of, what they're pretending not to know is it doesn't actually make sense for us to do this anymore, because nobody wants to be wrong, right? And so, just going back to Annie Duke and thinking in bets, it's like, no, we're not playing chess. Sometimes, the smartest poker players, when new cards are dealt, are going to go, oh, well, had I known that those cards were going to come up, I would have done something differently. But now there's new cards on the table. There's new information. And it's not, so we live in a probabilistic world. And so it's not about being right or wrong all the time. It's not about, we can't allow our egos or the appearance of having been wrong or the appearance of being wasteful to allow us to continue to do stupid things as new information becomes available. And so part of the reason I like that mantra so much is that it gets people off the dime, because that, in this context of the speed of decision making, it's that fear of being wrong, turning out to be wrong, quote unquote, that creates that analysis paralysis. If you go, hey, you know what, let's make the best decision now, reserve the right to get smarter later, that actually and everybody gets that and absorbs that, internalizes that, then that gives you the makings of an agile organization. Organization has some ability to be agile and pivot in response to the complexities of and uncertainties of the world as they play out.
Yeah. So I mean, even in the phrasing, there's a premise that we don't know everything we need to know, right?
Right.
And that we never will.
Yeah.
So therefore, we will get smarter. So don't beat yourself up around being wrong.
Yes.
Because you will be. Of course, you will be wrong.
Yeah.
Of course, there's those moments. So we've got to put aside the that part of it. The don't be afraid of making a bad decision. But what we can't put aside, and I think this is an important point in especially Annie Duke's phrasing of it, is it's still not free, right? It's still a bet, right?
Right.
Now it's not an all-in bet, which is really the point. You're not going all in yet, but you are. It does have a cost of making a decision,
right?
Just not a fatal one, but it has a cost. And then you will get smarter, and then you can make another decision, and then you can make another decision. So I guess just, in terms of the value and the operationalization of this particular rule, how do you think about those bets, without overextending the poker analogy? How do you think about those bets, and how much cost is the learning worth?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's going to vary from situation to situation. So I'm coming up empty and having this pithy answer that's a hard and fast rule.
Right.
But I appreciate you throwing me the curveball there, Jamie. But I guess I would say this, that I think it's not a license. I think it's not a license to be sloppy in decision making.
Yeah.
And not even, we've talked before about rushing into judgments and being impulsive. I don't think it's a license to do that.
Mhm.
I just think if the question on the table is, should we study this a little more, or should we actually make a decision? It comes back to something I think we talked about in episode 1. What is it really at risk? And if the risk is, no, we need to study this more because, we could blow up the planet, then, study it some more. And then, don't reserve the right to get smart, right?
Yeah.
Pause when unsure, which is, what the heuristic I put forth in episode 1. But if it's just about, oh, well, then, somebody could feel embarrassed, or, it'll be considered a mistake, but also a learning opportunity, then again, this, I think so much of this is about the what psychologists would call the cognitive reappraisal, like changing the meaning of what things mean in organizations. I think in some of the most agile organizations on the planet right now, it's the mantra is, fail fast and fail often, but then the whole idea is learning from it. Microsoft has had an amazing set of amazing performance over the last few years under Satya Nadella, and he said, I'm going to change the culture. It's the leading indicator of our future performance. And how do you want to change the culture? He wanted to go from an organization of know-it-alls to an organization of learn-it-alls, right? In young people these days, there's something very popular. I'll say for the benefit, just in case, like my mom is listening to this podcast, they're called F up nights. They say the whole thing, but and the whole idea is you can't possibly have learned something. If you're a young, if you are leading a startup and you're in your 30s, then surely you can't be there unless you have made mistakes, had failures, and learned from them. And so then you get to do this presentation at F Up Night, where in fact your failure becomes a badge of honor. And that's the cognitive reappraisal that's going on, is saying, if you're not failing, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're probably going to get left in the dust. And that's the whole, and so, different way of saying it, but reserving the right to get smarter is like the mantra that is about not clinging your ego to a decision, but just being super pragmatic about it.
Yeah, and I think to compare that to the heuristic from episode 1, which was pause when unsure, that's when the cost of a bad decision is high.
Yeah.
And you can either learn or consider more in the pause.
Right.
Whereas this is for a different circumstance where you're not going to learn more.
Right.
Without a decision.
Right.
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 And so years ago, I used to run a simulation that came out of the systems thinking world, and it was a maze, an unmarked maze that you had to learn as a team how to get through the maze, but you couldn't see which spots were good and which ones were bad. The only cost of stepping on a bad square is that you learned it was bad, you had to exit, and your teammate had to go in. But you could learn nothing without stepping into the maze. Nothing you could learn. You just look at an empty maze. And so I think that was really a good, that exercise that we used to use years ago was meant to teach this sort of fundamental premise, which is stop sitting in the conference room, not making a decision when no more learning is going to occur.
Right, right.
Make the decision that allows you to learn, which is really what you're after here. So
yeah,
excellent.
So I think at first blush, that might sound like it's inconsistent, and maybe beyond first blush, second blush, it might sound inconsistent with your heuristic. So
yeah, and I think in the end, once you get into it, it's after a lot of the same things.
Yeah, okay.
and the same conditions. So so my heuristic is delay decisions to the last possible moment.
Okay.
It's not delay any decision, and it's not sit around analyzing things. It still requires what you're talking about, which is deliberate actions or decisions that enable learning, right? So this actually comes from product development, lean product development specifically. And the premise of, if you try to spec out everything in the product you're developing at the very beginning, you've shut off the opportunity to learn. Right. And so some things you need to decide early on because you have to develop based on an architecture, et cetera. But other decisions, can I delay? Can I pursue two different paths and then wait? Do I need to decide on the paint color now? Well, if the printing's due, then yeah, I do need to decide on the paint color, the color scheme. But if not, why decide too early? So that's really the premise, but it really requires a couple of things. And one of them, the second part, I'll relate directly back to yours.
Okay.
One is it requires that you have to define when the last possible moment is.
Right.
Right. So you have to know when that is.
Right. What's the forcing function?
What's the forcing function? So if you don't know when that is and you just delay, then you've missed your chance. Then the opportunity floated by you. Then you've just wandered into the eternity, never having made a decision, and that's not good. That's not helpful. So you do have to know what the last possible moment is. In product development, it's often when does the curve of increase in spending and capital go up, right? Like at this point, we have to make decisions because we have to buy tooling or write code or whatever that might be. But up until that point, we haven't committed the capital. We haven't committed. So that's the last possible moment. So that's the one requirement is you have to know what the last possible moment is. You have to have a definition for that. You're driving along the highway and it's like, here's a rest stop. You're trying to make a decision. Do I eat? Do you need more gas? Do I need to stop at a hotel? If you miss this rest stop, the next one is in an hour. Right. It's like, okay, well, at that point, I need to make a decision, not 3 miles from now, but now, right? Because here's this rest stop, and then there's an hour cost to not making that decision. So that's one important ingredient. The other important ingredient is that you actually have a plan for how more learning will occur.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's not just time will make things more clear, right? It's like, no. You actually have to say, here's the experiments I'm going to run. Here's the test I'm going to go do. Here's the people I'm going to go ask, right? And so again, in product development, we very much play into what is the learning plan, right? And this is where I think in many ways it can be very similar. It's, well, I'm going to place this bet, right?
Right.
I'm going to place this bet. It's a decision. I'm going to learn from it, and then I'm going to make the next decision. I think there are. It's just different contexts of when you're making a decision that you will change later. That's sort of the context of yours. Whereas my heuristic is I'm making decisions with the intent of learning because I do have a strategy I can use to learn more without making sort of final decisions. But in the end, the intent is the same. I'm going to test against reality the best way I know how, whether it's make a decision or it's go do an experiment.
Yeah, the intent in both is maximizing learning.
Yes.
And I think the Annie Duke's poker metaphor we probably tortured pretty good here. But I think yours is saying you don't you don't have to you don't have to commit yourself to to how you're going to play the entire, what do you say in poker, round, hand, whatever.
Yeah.
At the outset, right? You get to see as I'm demonstrating how long it's been since I played poker, but how there's no reason to commit yourself before you when there are still learning available to you. Yes. And then at some point you can't allow yourself to get paralyzed because you might turn out to be wrong.
Yes.
You actually just have to do something and give yourself the liberty, give yourself the freedom and the confidence to go, well, hell, I mean, I hope life's probabilistic. If it turns out the way I want, then great, we'll double down. And if it doesn't, reserve the right to get smarter.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's the key point is there learning available, right?
Yeah.
And whether time or a strategy to go after that learning. And the other side of it then is, that last possible moment, which is what's the cost of making the decision too early, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm known in our house of asking my wife, what do we want to have for dinner on Saturday night, and she'll say it's Tuesday. I don't know what I'm in the mood for. Well, that's clearly learning, right?
Yeah,
that's learning that will occur on Saturday.
Right.
Now, if what we're really in the mood for requires reservations that fill up by Thursday, then we will have missed that chance, right?
Right.
And so those are the trade-offs. That's the balance we're trying to strike. I think the importance of this decision, of this heuristic, is in particular where making it too early closes opportunities to you.
Yes.
Closes or creates waste.
Yes.
Right. And so you've closed opportunity because you blocked off that learning opportunity. So you've perhaps made a less informed decision, or you've generated waste. And a favorite little story of mine is many years ago, we were working with a university on their faculty payroll process. And it's an extremely boring process, but their problem was they had all these revisions that came in. They had to do 3 rounds of revisions to the monthly payroll, because faculty is paid a little differently. Some are paid on 9 months, some on 12. They get grants. How many courses are you teaching? It's not like a salary. And so there was too many rounds of revisions. And so when we really examined it, what we found out is the reasons that there were so many revisions is that the information wasn't available yet.
Yeah.
So they'd start at the beginning of the month. They'd send out the spreadsheet. They get revisions back. They'd send it back out. They get more revisions back. And what we found is when we just sent it 3 days out before payroll, almost all the information was finally available. And you didn't need 3 revisions. The only reason we needed 3 revisions was because we sent out the draft too early.
Right.
And so that's where waste is created by trying to make a decision too early. And we feel compelled. Like I'm a check the box kind. Like I love to move things, check something off my to-do list, move it to the done pile on my Kanban board.
Yeah.
I love that moment, right?
Yeah,
it feels good. Hey, one last thing, right? We've made a decision. But if making a decision creates waste or closes off the ability to make a smarter decision, that's when it's a bad practice.
Yeah, you know what? And that's a theme that I think a lot of people in Nassim Taleb and the anti-fragile world, the real world risk folks talk a lot about is, what are the most important things you can have in life? What are your most important assets? You can say time, and that certainly makes sense. Family relationships for sure. But also, and often overlooked, is options. Optionality is like the name of the game, really. Mm-hmm. Preserving your options, strategically preserving your options. I think that's the gist of what your heuristic is going for there.
Yeah, and interesting. I know we've talked about in the last episode a bit about strategy and von Clausewitz and folks like that. But there was a strategy development philosophy called scenario planning, which was all about options development and how to manage your options strategically. And that really is what this one's all about. It's about leaving your options open, but again, not by just delaying for the sake of delaying, but for the sake of learning.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's an important contextual purpose behind both of our heuristics.
Yeah. So now they all make sense in my head. They fit together in my head, and I hope that's true. Hope that's true for our listeners as well. But,
yes. Well, and again, they have their own context. They have to take these, use them as we offer them, or take them and help them make them smarter about their own set of heuristics.
Yeah, and I think the key thing to remember is, the thing about heuristics, they're decision rules. A good heuristic is reliable most of the time. It's not perfect, and the other thing is that that they are they have ecological effectiveness. It's that what counts as a good heuristic is going to be from one decision-making ecology to the next is going to, what counts as a different, a good heuristic is going to vary.
Yeah, absolutely. And so hopefully through the series, we're making people smarter about the practicality of using heuristics,
Right.
not just the theory. So through this podcast, please do follow us so you don't miss an episode. Also, it helps other people find us, rate us, review us, give us feedback, whether it's on your favorite podcast platform, or it's just send us an email. Right, we love to hear from folks. Tell us about things. All of those things are great. You can find us at jflinch.com/happyheuristics or mgstrat.com/happyheuristics. And we always like to end with a bonus heuristic. So why don't you tell?
Yeah. So bonus heuristic to take us out today is never hit reply all unless you really, really, really have to.
Good one to follow.